Good afternoon. My name is Pam Dukeman, and I am the Finance Director for the town of Westwood. Each year at this time, we present at town meeting a financial presentation to update our residents on where we stand with town finances and to give you some background for the articles that you are voting at town meeting. This year, we are pre-recording that message, and my thanks to Westwood Media and particularly Connor Lynch for his help in putting this together. We are going to review some of our financial information. I will point out that everything we're looking at is in the town meeting book that you received at home. Also, we will be doing our normal review of information, and then we'll update on how has the COVID-19 situation impacted our finances. The town had completed our budget process. The Board of Selectmen recommendation, the Finance and Warrant Commission review process had been completed before the real onset of the COVID-19 situation. We are still able to stay with those same budget recommendations, and we will review, and I'll show you why that is the case. So, as we start with some of our information, we look first at a reminder that the financial articles at town meeting have to encompass a wide area of town finances. Not only the operating budget, which is our most important area, where we deliver the school and municipal services each year, probably the most visible area of our budget to the community. We also have to have articles that take care of our capital assets. It's important that we maintain our capital buildings, update our equipment. Some of our departments are very reliant on capital equipment, particularly DPW and fire. So it's important that we address those capital needs. We also have to handle our long-term liabilities. Those include pension assessments and our OPEB liabilities. We also need to make sure we have appropriate reserve levels. Those are important not only for our bond rating, but to help us through any kind of disruption of revenue or rainy day situation. And we'll come back to those reserves when we talk about the COVID-19. So all of that, we're trying to make sure we're looking at our whole financial picture and balancing all of that on our tax bill impact. It is not an easy balance, but each year the Select Board and the Finance and Warrant Commission are putting forth to town meeting a comprehensive, well-balanced budget that does address all of these areas. Looking first now at the revenue. What revenue funds our town meeting budget? Our projected revenue for FY21 is $106 million, a 4.2% increase over our current year. The pie chart shows what are the sources of our revenue, and we're heavily reliant on our real estate taxes, as shown in the blue piece of the pie. Almost 80% of our funding comes from our real estate taxes. We have a much lower reliance on state aid, as shown in red, about 6% of our budget. This is a very typical financing model for a suburban community in Massachusetts. If you were to see this same pie chart for a large city in Massachusetts, you'd see something quite different, with a much higher reliance on state aid. So this is typical for a suburb. We're very reliant on our tax base. That is a very challenging model to work with. Our tax base is restricted by Proposition 2.5, and again, it's always difficult to balance our service needs on the tax bill impact. So it is difficult each and every year to put together a balanced budget under this financing model. Looking now, because the taxes is such the main part of our revenue, we have the next couple of slides, we'll look at some components of the taxes. This slide shows the tax calculation per Proposition 2.5. Proposition 2.5 is a pure formula-driven revenue that restricts in total how much a town can raise in taxes. It does not depend on what services a community may want delivered. It does not consider what the economy is at the time. It's just a pure formula. So this chart shows several years of that formula and how it calculates our tax base. Our FY21 projected budget is shown on the right-hand column. And you can see at the top of the chart with the red circle, the formula starts, 79.7 million, starts with a number coming from the year before. We are then able to increase that by 2.5%. We are able to add in estimated new growth, which is growth we anticipate from new construction, commercial or residential. If we had a general override, that would then be added in. That gives us our base tax levy limit. We then add on to that exempt debt, $1.2 million for FY21, and that is the principal and interest for any debt approved outside of Prop 2.5 as a debt exemption. For Westwood right now, that is the high school project and the library. And then that brings us to our levy capacity, or the upper limit that the town could raise in taxes. So $85.5 million. The next circle you see in that column is what we're projecting to raise, $83.3 million. So we're not utilizing the full allotment. That difference, as shown on that shaded line in blue in the bottom, is what's called excess levy, or unused capacity. So projected to be about $220,000 right now for FY21. If you take a look at that blue line over the last couple of years, the columns on that slide, starting on the left, FY17, that excess levy was $1.5 million. Over $1 million FY18, $1 million FY19, $800,000 in FY20. That is showing you that the town is not taxing to the maximum capacity. So in each of those years, our town meeting could have voted more, could have added to budgets, but did not. Again, mindful of the tax bill impact, we're leaving excess levy, not utilizing the full components under Prop 2.5. And again, I'll point out general overrides. We have not had one in town since 2007. Looking at the next slide, another component of our tax revenue, the commercial value is a very important component of the tax revenue and to our overall finances. Commercial property contributes to the tax base, helps pay for services. That lessens the burden on our residential tax bill. The pie chart on the left shows for the current year, FY20, that commercial value is about 15% of the total value in town. And that number has increased because of University Station. However, we have what's called a split tax rate. We tax the commercial property at a much higher rate than residential. And because of that, the commercial property pays more. When you look at the pie chart on the right, commercial is paying 26% of the total tax bill. So again, commercial is 15% of value in town, but they're contributing 26% towards our total taxes. That is a very important indicator for our residential homeowners. The information on the bottom here shows you what does that mean to each homeowner. In the current year, FY20, the average homeowner in town, the bill is just over $9,500. Without that commercial split rate, that bill would be over $10,900, $1,380 higher, or a 14% increase. So the split tax rate and the value of commercial property is very important as far as providing some tax relief to residents in the community. Another look at the taxes, one of the difficulties with Proposition 2.5 is that people think that's a limit on their individual tax bill. And that's not how the formula works. We saw on the first slide with the formula, Proposition 2.5 limits the total amount that the town can collect. It does not limit what happens to an individual homeowner. The bar graph here shows that individual bill for the average home in town, valued again in this year about $660,000. In the current year, that home had an increase in value of about 4%, and they had a tax increase of about 3%. However, every individual home may have a different value change and therefore a different tax rate change. We're showing here at the bottom of your screen, and again, more information in your FinCom warrant book, we show a wide range of homes in town at different price points to show, and these are actual homes, to show different value changes, and on the rightmost column, different tax increase changes. So again, Prop 2.5 controls the total amount of that the town can collect in taxes, does not dictate the individual tax bill change. That is based on your property value. Sometimes certain neighborhoods increase at a higher rate, sometimes certain types of homes. Right now in town, the small ranch, the small Cape house is accelerating in value at a higher rate than other homes, and that does result in a different tax change for those homes. Looking next, University Station. University Station has helped us in all budget areas. As we pointed out, it's helped grow the total share of commercial value in town. It's also brought us direct tax revenue dollars. The table on the top shows the increase in tax revenue each year from University Station since the project started in FY15. The total column on the right shows to date, $5.9 million has been received in annual new tax revenue from University Station. The graphic on the bottom shows what had we planned to do with that money. So even before the project came to fruition, our planning groups were looking at how could we distribute that revenue to as many areas of the budget as possible. Starting on the left, direct service costs. We knew by studies that we would have service impact from that size project coming to town, particularly our public safety departments. We also, moving over, knew we could help our operating budgets. We often cannot provide the budget's increase to our school and municipal departments under Prop 2.5 that's desired to maintain the level of service that the community would like. We knew we could utilize University Station revenue to do that. We also knew we could use some of that revenue for debt service, that would help us do projects without having to do the debt authorization outside of 2.5. And finally, we knew we could use some of that revenue for direct tax relief to our residents to help control and mitigate the increase in the tax bill each year. Looking at the next slide, how have we actually used the money? So that was the plan. So to date, how have we used that $5.9 million in our budget process? The number one thing we have done with that money is used it to support the operating budgets, with the majority of that, almost $2 million, going to the school budget, $700,000 to the municipal budget. So that means we were able to increase those budgets, provide those services to the community without asking for a Proposition 2.5 override. Simply put, the school budget is about $2 million higher today than it could be without University Station. We would have had to decrease that budget or go out to the community for an override to have that same level of service. The next category down, provide for the increases in direct service impact, about $1.9 million. And there, most of that money has gone to the municipal side, $1.7 million to our public safety departments. We have been able to hire over 20 positions in our police and fire departments. And again, we would not have been able to do that without a Proposition 2.5 override unless we had the University Station money. In the next category, some of the funding has been used for capital projects. A one-time use of $975,000 to our capital fund, which was subsequently used as the funding source to replace and repurpose the Play-High Field. And then about $800,000 used to fund the debt service on the police station project. Again, to keep that project within Proposition 2.5. And then finally, each year we've used about $500,000 of University Station revenue to help subsidize the tax bills for our residents. So we have extra money each year from University Station. We don't increase our spending to meet that level of revenue. Then that helps, taking in that money, helps subsidize the services we already provide, helping to mitigate the burden on our residential tax bill. Next, we're looking at the expenditure side. The expenditures for FY21, $106 million, 4.2% increase. The pie chart shows how we allocate the spending between areas. As shown in the blue piece, the majority of our spending, almost 70% of our budget, is on our annual operating costs for our school and municipal departments. So the one-year cost to deliver those services to the community. And the largest our services are delivered with our staff. So the largest piece of spending in those budgets is for our staff, our school teachers, our police, our firefighters, our DPW employees. By far the largest area of our spending. Our next area shown in green are fixed benefits and overhead costs, about 14% of our budget. This is where we fund our health insurance, pension costs, payroll taxes, all of those things for our school and municipal employees, as well as pay for our overall comprehensive insurance costs for our buildings and our small reserve accounts. Next, looking at that operating budget. Our FY21 operating budget proposed for fiscal 21, $98 million. The bar graph shows the distribution of that budget by category. In blue, we show the school budget, $48 million, municipal, $22 in red, fixed costs 17 in yellow, and then our debt service about 5.9 in green. This is a very standard distribution of costs for a suburban community like Westwood with a high-performing school system, where you would see the school budget represent the most significant piece of the operating budget. So the operating budget proposed is a 3.8% increase over the current year, and we do vote that budget in one article, Article 3, at town meeting. Looking next at another area of our spending is our capital budget. It is important for us to continually reinvest in our capital assets, make sure we maintain our buildings, our fields, our roads, and again, make sure we're purchasing equipment so that our departments who rely on equipment for operations, DPW and fire, have up-to-date equipment that they need to provide their services safely and efficiently. Each year we have two main budget capital articles, one for the school and one for municipal. We call those our base capital articles. We are recommending in FY21, shown in green, $2.3 million for those two articles, same level as occurred in the current year's budget. The bar graph shows the amount we spend each year on those base capitals. By financial policies, we should be spending about $2.3 million. If you look at the left side of the graph, you can see that for many years we were far below what we should have been spending on capital, almost not even at a third of what we should have done. The select board has very methodically been increasing our allocation towards capital, looking to build that to the level that our targets indicate we should be at. We were able to do that in FY20, and we'll continue to do that for FY21. So we've made some significant progress on the capital budget. We have in recent years had additional capital articles beyond our base capital. So because we had not been meeting our base allocation for so many years, we now are trying to do a little bit more, have a couple of additional capital articles. So the effort is to get at projects that have been deferred or that projects that are too large to fit into the ongoing base allocation. The bar graph shows the amount that's been allocated the last few years in these additional capital. Some of the projects that have been done, you can see listed here on the slide. They include the high school tennis court project, large HVAC project at Thurston Middle School, some school IT work. Again, this is trying to get at that capital above and beyond our base articles. This additional capital articles have been funded with either free cash, which is really the town's retained earnings each year, or a hotel motel tax. A final area of our spending to look at is our debt service. So these slides look at the town's debt. The bar graph here represents the overall total debt outstanding for the town at the end of each fiscal year, with the end of June 30th this year shown in green, just over $35 million. You can see on the far end of the graph that when we issue new debt, we have an increase in the total debt outstanding. So when we issue debt for the police or fire station, we had an increase in our total debt. That comes down quite quickly as we do a couple of years payments towards those bonds, as we don't issue new debt and bring it right back in line. So we're able to absorb the debt when we time our new debt to come online at certain spots. It's been a very favorable borrowing climate for the town for the last several years. We have a very strong credit rating. We currently have a AAA with Standard & Poor's and a AA1 with Moody's. Those are excellent ratings for a small community like Westwood. All of our residents should take pride in that rating. That really is a reflection on how our residents conduct the finance portion of the town meeting each year. That great credit rating helps us to get a great interest rate when we do go out and borrow money. Our last long-term bond was issued in 2016, a $16 million bond. We received a 2.4% interest rate. And we just recently, a couple of weeks ago, issued a short-term one-year note, a $3.1 million note, and we received 1.04% interest rate on that. So it's been a great time for us to issue debt. A major portion of how we look at our finances and plan our budget is to look at when does our debt end, when does some debt roll off, and try to time new debt to come on and replace that debt and stay within the same budget. So looking at that, two pieces of debt. First, our debt outside of Proposition 2.5, or what's called exempt debt. Again, as we mentioned before, for FY21, that's $1.2 million as shown in the green bar. And again, for us, that's the high school project and the library project. We've talked about this before, but we are at the end of the high school project. After this budget year, we will have 2 payments left. That project will end in FY23. So as that high school debt ends, that will give us a nice opportunity to bring on the new elementary school project, and this will enable us to handle a portion of that new project. The graph at the bottom looks at the same, our debt payments going forward for debt within 2.5. Again, as shown in green, the debt for FY21. We do have in FY22, we would make the last payment of a previous 10-year bond for a DPW road project. A $4.6 million bond issued in 2012 will be completed. Again, that provides us with the space to bring on our next road bond, as that can come online and absorb the debt capacity here that's rolling off. Now, after looking at our revenue and expenditures, to stop for a moment and talk about the financial impact of COVID-19. Looking first at the current year, FY20, the year that ends this June 30th. We have incurred some additional costs by the school and municipal departments to handle the impact of the COVID-19. Those include public safety staffing issues, purchase of appropriate equipment, the PPE, some technology costs to set up remote operations for the town and particularly the school, additional facility cleaning cost, and then some school impact due to loss of revenue from certain programs that they conduct. So not a significant amount of money through all those categories, but an impact. We do have state and federal funding available to help us absorb some of these costs. Looking now at our budget impact going forward, what is the impact for FY21? As I indicated, the budget as already approved by the Select Board and Finance and Warrant Commission can remain in place for FY21. Town meeting has been preparing for this situation for a rainy day for about 10 years, or since our last recession. And how has town meeting done that? Town meeting has approved very structurally sound budgets. We do not use any one-time subsidies to plug our budget. Town meeting approves very conservative revenue estimates for our budgets. We don't inflate our revenue for the next year and try to increase our spending to meet that revenue. We're very, very conservative. Our town meeting has very purposely built up our reserve accounts over the last several years to meet levels to help us through this type of situation. And essentially, our overall finances have been designed to maintain our essential services during any kind of unusual or rainy day disruption. We do not want to have to dismantle our school system or our public safety departments because of a disruption in service. And again, our town meeting has prepared us to meet that challenge. So we are able to keep the FY21 budget as proposed in place, and that will help us bridge to FY22. When we would start our FY22 budget, that would be late in this calendar year, late in 2020. At that point, we will know what's the ongoing impact of the pandemic. Has this continued to be an economic challenge and impact? Do we have major changes in our service deliveries, in our school operations, in other departments, our recreation or library services? We will be able to plan accordingly for the FY22 budget to whatever that new reality might be going forward. Just one other look at a detail level. How can we maintain that budget for FY21? So we just want to point out a couple of items. First, on the revenue side, meals and hotel tax. This is a revenue source that will be disrupted. Clearly, we'll experience a decrease until situation is restored and restaurants are back in business. We currently take in about $200,000 a quarter from our meals and hotel tax revenue. However, when our town meeting accepted the meals and hotel tax revenue, they very specifically set up that revenue to go into a separate fund. We do not apply that to our ongoing operating budget. Very specifically, that revenue goes to a separate fund. It takes 2/3 vote of town meeting to utilize that revenue. And the town has only utilized that revenue to do some of the additional capital projects that we discussed previously. That is quite different than some other communities. Other communities have this revenue source, the hotel and meals tax, built into their ongoing operations. They are struggling with their FY21 budget because they have to reduce that revenue estimate, and it's resulting in decreases to their core services. Again, our town meeting handles that differently. Second, looking at local receipts, another revenue category. This is where town meeting, again, has been very, very conservative with this revenue estimate. This includes where we raise the motor vehicle excise tax and some other fees that are raised at a local level. We are very conservative with this estimate. We level funded the FY21 estimate at $4.2 million, same as the current year. Our actual receipts in prior year, and we're on track for current year, were $5.9 million. So our receipts were higher than the budget estimate we're using. This budget was built to absorb a fluctuation and potential decrease in the motor vehicle excise. Again, something that you're seeing different with other communities. Other communities the last couple of years, as motor vehicle excise increased, they increased their revenue expectation. They cannot now meet that for FY21. They have to reduce their core services. Again, we have not done so. Finally, looking at state aid. State aid is likely to be reduced for FY21. The state will not get to their budget process until much later this year than normal. We don't expect to see the state budget and our revenue for state aid until late summer, early fall. That is likely to be disruptive. As we indicated in the beginning, it's not a huge source of revenue for the town, just about 6% of our overall budget. Any reduction to that state aid, we will be able to replace with funding from our stabilization reserve. And just to give some idea of the magnitude here, a 10% reduction to total state aid would be about $660,000, a 20% reduction, $1.2 million. Again, we won't know those numbers until later in the summer. Looking at our reserve accounts, as I indicated, town meeting has very methodically over the last 10 years built up our reserves. We currently have $3.4 million in our stabilization reserve account. We have been saving it for a rainy day to not disrupt services. This is the funding we will use later in the fall if we need to replace state aid as a revenue source. We also, our town meeting is very conservative with our free cash allocation. Again, our annual retained earnings certification. Our town meeting only uses free cash for capital items, does not use any of that for our ongoing operating budget. We're very conservative with how much we use. We have financial policies. We currently have, after what would be used at this town meeting, we would have $2.7 million in free cash allocation. Again, available to help us later in the fall with budget. And then finally, to point out, there is additional state and federal money coming. It's called the CARES Act funding from some of the federal acts that have been passed to help us with the COVID-19 impact and budget disruption and revenue disruption. We will know more about the amount available for FY21 and how we can use that later in the fall. But again, that would still be available to us to adjust for any disruption to our budget. So we will be able to maintain the budgets as put forth. There will be a fall town meeting to adjust accordingly for what we need to change in our revenue estimates, particularly with state aid. And we've just kind of identified what would be the sources of the ways for us to make those adjustments. Now, the upcoming town meeting this year, due to the changes in the town meeting process and guidelines because of COVID-19, we will only be addressing the financial articles, Articles 1 through 13 in the town meeting book that you received. So each year, Articles 1 and 2 are budget supplements to the current year. So they're things we would use to clean up in our FY20 budget. This year, Article 1, we do not need that transfer, so there'll be no action taken on that. Article 2, $444,000 total article where we're transferring some from funds. The major item we're dealing with there is $350,000, an appropriation to a school special education reserve account. Article 3, as we've mentioned, is the main FY21 operating budget. $98.2 million, and we vote that all in the one article, Article 3. Next, Article 4 to 9 are all of the capital budget articles. As we mentioned, important to continue to reinvest in our capital assets and equipment. First, our base articles. Article 4 and 5 are those base annual municipal and school capital articles. $1.3 million for school capital, just over $1 million. 1.3 for municipal, just over $1 million for school. Those are the same levels, again, that we did in the current year. All of those articles are funded by free cash, so money already on hand. Article 6 is capital for our sewer operations, $765,000. That is funded by sewer retained earnings. Article 7, a small amount, $65,000, funded by ambulance receipts. Articles 8 and 9 are those additional capital articles that we've mentioned that we've done in prior years. Article 8, additional capital for some town and school projects, $1.3 million, all of that to be funded by free cash. Article 9, some additional capital for some town-wide recreation projects, $1,050,000, and that includes field work of $775,000 and some pool projects, $275,000. That article is proposed to be funded by the hotel meals tax revenue, and I will point out that that article was not recommended for approval by the Finance and Warrant Commission. Looking next, Article 10 is an authorization to borrow $325,000 for a large piece of equipment for the DPW operation, one vehicle. That's a little bit larger than our normal cash appropriation for equipment, so we would ask to have authorization to borrow that and do a very short term, under 3-year payback of that. So Article 10 would be to approve funding to authorize that as a borrowing. Article 11, this looks at our stabilization account, that main savings account we have. The bar graph shows the balance in that account over the last several years. And you can see what we mentioned before about how the town meeting has methodically increased that budget very slowly but methodically over the last several years. As shown in green, we would have $3.4 million available in that account to help for the rainy day. Town meeting action, we would continue with the same action that we've done the last several years, which is to transfer $125,000 from free cash into that stabilization fund. Article 12, our OPEB funding. OPEB is a long-term liability, much like the pension liability, but for healthcare costs. This bar graph shows our annual appropriation towards that liability. The recommendation would be, as shown in green, $1.465 million towards that liability. That's in line with where we've been the last couple of years. As you can see on the bar graph, the town has made significant progress on this OPEB liability, both from a funding side and from an expense control side. So again, Article 12 would be the standard OPEB funding to the liability. And finally, Article 13. Article 13 is a road improvement bond. We did the first piece of this bond authorization at last year's town meeting. This would be authorization to approve funding for $4.65 million to fund some road projects. Those would include Route 109 improvements would be the majority of that for $2.5 million. And that would involve repaving and redoing all of 109. The next item, $500,000 for crosswalk and safety improvements townwide. The next item, $1.6 million for paving and sidewalk enhancements and curbing in a couple of areas. They do include for the sidewalks, High Rock and Hartford Street area, and Hartford would be from 109 to Wessex, Pond Street from Clapboard Tree to Pond Plain, and then the sidewalks on East Street from the MBTA Bridge to Smith Drive. I do want to point out and mention that this does not include any funding for sidewalks on Gay Street. So again, this article would be to ask for authorization to borrow $4.65 million. It would be approved as a borrowing article. The town treasurer would issue a 10-year bond for this. And as we saw before, this would come in and replace a road bond that's now dropping off. So we're able to fund this road bond within the budget and within Proposition 2.5. That does complete the review of our overall finances and the 13 articles that you'll be voting at this year's town meeting. We thank you very much for your attention to our town finances. Again, there's additional information both in the town meeting book that you had mailed to your house, as well as on our website. We have a lot of financial information available. Again, our thanks to Westwood Media for allowing us to do this. Thank you again for your attention to the town finances, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming town meeting. Thank you.